Now we're going to work with a group of older students. These junior high school students will be introduced to mind mapping, and you'll see how they're able to apply it immediately to recording their ideas on paper. Today I'm going to teach you about mind mapping. I'm also going to teach you about ways that you can use mind mapping for note-taking and planning and a lot of other things. So we'll start out by making a map. And to make a mind map, all you need is some unlined paper and colored pens and an idea about your topic. The topic I'd like to suggest is intelligence. Now, for a long time, you were tested, and people were tested throughout the years, for two kinds of intelligence. One was mathematical, and the other was verbal. So if you had skill in those areas, you were considered smart. But there's really a lot more than that. And Howard Gardner at Harvard discovered or uncovered the idea of many intelligences. How many do you think he came up with?
7?
7, right. The 7 intelligences. How did you know that? That's amazing. All right, we're going to put a 7 up here. 7 intelligences. Now, I want to represent my idea with a symbol or a picture. Besides the number 7, what else could we put up here that would represent intelligence?
A brain.
A brain, okay. Now, here's how I draw a brain. It's to make sort of a little cloud-like shape, and then where the brainstem comes in, I make it down longer like this, with maybe a couple of other lines. And that represents a brain, but I might not remember that this means 7 intelligences when I look at this map later. So we'll add another key word. What's the key word that could go here?
Intelligence.
Right. Okay. I'll make a big S because we're talking here about not one kind of intelligence, but multiple intelligences. Okay, now, for a mind map, once you have your central image, you just allow your mind to kind of wander, to think about the topic. You don't have to think of the most important thing first, but just whatever comes to your mind. So here we're looking for what are the 7 kinds of intelligence. Now, intelligence might be something that you've always done well or easily, or you might have noticed somebody else that you know seems to pick up a certain skill very rapidly. That's an area where they have intelligence. So what's an example that comes to your minds?
Socializing.
Socializing, okay. Fun and intelligence both. Socializing, in terms of what Howard Gardner came up with, is called interpersonal intelligence. So we'll print inter, and I'm going to put personal in a different color so that we can kind of emphasize that this is interpersonal, because we have another kind coming up that's similar. Now we have to draw a little picture or symbol to represent 2 people relating or talking or socializing. And for that, I'll show you a real simple symbol that I use. It's drawn like this. So when I draw that, I know that means 2 people talking or shaking hands or somehow relating. And that's enough to help me remember this. Now, I printed all the words on the map. And that's what you should do when you make a mind map. Use capital letters and print. There's a couple reasons for that. What do you think they are?
Well, you can't really read it when it's sloppy or...
Okay. Right. If the writing is sloppy, if you've written rapidly, it's very hard to read later. Anybody ever have trouble reading their notes later? Okay, that happens to everybody. If you print, it's much easier. And Evan?
Don't you remember it longer?
Right, you'll remember it longer too. So if these words are printed, they're more memorable. You can glance at them and read them, and you can close your eyes and remember what this says. The picture is going to help you remember it, and the printed words. So you've got 2 ways to help you remember instead of the usual one. Okay, another kind of intelligence, something that you enjoy or do well.
Sports.
Sports? Okay, now sports is an interesting one, and that's an important one. And you'll notice there are people for whom sports is really an easy area. There may be lots of sports they do well. The kind of intelligence that they're showing by doing sports well is called bodily kinesthetic. We can just say bodily, or we could use the fancier word kinesthetic. And a good example is an athlete. Now, there are people who are bodily kinesthetic learners. That means they learn best when they're doing and physically moving around. And you may know whether or not you learn best when you're up trying something as opposed to sitting at a desk. If you get up later and work at the board to make a big mind map, that might be easier for you than sitting and listening at a desk because you'd have a strong kinesthetic component to your learning. Okay, Well, how could we represent bodily kinesthetic with a visual?
A guy like lifting a weight.
A guy lifting a weight. What are some other possibilities?
A runner.
A runner. Okay. Could be someone doing any sport, maybe bicycling. Just to make it kind of simple, I'm going to use the idea of the runner because I can do that with a stick figure. And we'll have the person running. Now, I'm not worrying about making this a great drawing because mind mapping really doesn't have to do with drawing as much as it has to do with symbolically representing ideas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's one more intelligence we need to add to our list. We've got inter, between people, intra, within yourself, bodily kinesthetic, mathematical, verbal, musical, and the last one is a skill that I use a lot and that we're using right now by drawing pictures.
Artistic.
Artistic, okay, and the word they use for artistic in this case, and this is a big part of being artistic, is visual. The artist, the visual artist, is looking at images and creating images and representing ideas with pictures. Now we also have artists who may be up here in the bodily kinesthetic, like a dancer. But visual, and there's another word that goes with visual, and that's spatial. That's the ability to look at spatial relationships, to find your way around, well, one example would be right now if you close your eyes for just a moment and imagine that there's a cube right in front of your face. The cube has different colors on different sides, and right now a bright green is facing you. Now the cube is going to turn so that you can see the bottom of it. It turns slowly and you see yellow facing you. Now the cube turns to the side to reveal purple on the side. Okay, now open your eyes. How many of you could see that in your own mind's eye? Good. You're using a visual spatial awareness in order to do that. An architect would be someone who'd need to be able to think a lot about what does this look like spatially from more than one angle. That's a more sophisticated skill. But the ability to visualize, to form pictures in your mind, or to think of a picture while you're reading, or to create visuals. So as we said originally, the artistic, maybe the painter. We'll put a little paintbrush here. That's a visual kind of intelligence. And this is a mind map. Okay, you've now got your materials ready, and ideally, work with a piece of paper that's this large. Anything you have right now is fine, but eventually this 11 by 17 sheet is a really good size for mind mapping. And you've got your colored pens, and all we're going to do right now is a word map. That means you don't have to worry about symbols right now. If you want to draw something, you certainly can, but you don't have to worry about thinking of a picture. If that's a problem, just put down the words. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to make a word map, and whatever your topic is will be in the middle. So I'm just going to write topic here. But you would write whatever you've decided to make a map about, you would record that here. The topic is here. And you might want to put a shape or something around the topic to emphasize it. Each idea is going to go on a line that connects to the center. So I'm just going to write idea here. This might be your first idea, and you might have a couple more thoughts relating to that that would go on lines coming from there. So it's branching out kind of like a tree branch. Or if you know what a neuron looks like in the brain, it looks a lot like a neuron. See, a neuron branches out, and then the dendrites branch further and further, and the axon has dendrites on the end of it. All of these are parts of the cell that reach out to make connections, and they branch out, so it ends up looking a lot like a mind map does. But for your word map, you'll be branching out, and your lines will be slightly curved. That gives you more space to write words. Now this might be one idea, then I might think of a different idea. So I would put the new idea here, and remember, wherever you can, you just want to put one word printed on a line. And if you have a few more thoughts about that, they would branch off from there. Now, you continue to think of ideas, whatever occurs to you. You can add color for emphasis. And sometimes instead of working hard at thinking of stuff, just stop and color in a little bit. When you stop and relax and color and kind of doodle, your brain is still working, especially the right hemisphere of your brain is generating ideas. So you can stop and do that and allow the ideas to come to you instead of working at trying to think. Another idea might appear here, and you would write it down here. And you might want to emphasize, maybe you have a thought that you think this is really important. Then you can write that word really large. So a larger word will be something you can remember better, and it will emphasize it. You can also emphasize with colors or lines or shapes. So the word map has a central word or shape, ideas branching from the center, more ideas connected to those, and you just keep branching and writing as long as you have ideas. That's how it works. Remember that you can emphasize anything that you think is important. And also the last part of this is you can see and make connections. You might decide that there's a relationship between these two ideas. Maybe they fit together and you'll put them in one big shape. Or maybe you have an idea that this might be related to that. So the arrows will help you draw the connections. It's really important to develop the skill of looking for patterns and looking for connections. And this mapping will help you do that. And you'll see that as you begin the process. So now you're going to make your first map, which is a word map. Words only, pictures only if you want to. Pictures are optional. Okay, what your topic is going to be is imagine you have a magic wand and you can make one event perfect in your life. You're going to map out what that would be like. For example, if you went to the perfect music concert, what would be happening, what would go on? It's magic, so don't limit yourself at all in what you put down there. Suppose you had a day in school that was perfect. What would that day be like? How would school work? What would be structured? And really think about it. At first you might say, oh, perfect day, I would just play all day. But what would you do specifically? What would make it the most fun and challenging? After a while you might get bored with one thing. So think about it. Make it an ideal event. It could be a party. It could be whatever you want. And let all the ideas that come to you just pour out onto the paper and use the word mapping system to record them. Okay, is that pretty clear to everybody? Think you can do that? Okay, great. Give it a try. Okay, you've just completed your first map using mostly words and pictures if you wanted to. Now think about what that felt like for you, what the process was like as you were putting your ideas on paper using mind mapping. How did it work?
Well, I found it a lot easier than normal note-taking that we normally do.
Okay, it was easier. Let me map this, okay? We'll make a map of this too. So now we're going to talk about mind mapping, and I'm going to draw a little easel here, just kind of a simple version of the one that I have in the classroom. And that will represent the easel with a mind map on it. And I'm going to add a little bit of color since mind maps are usually colorful and they sort of branch out. This will be just a symbol to represent a mind map. And so the question is, how do mind maps feel when you make them, especially the first time? So tell me again.
I thought it was easier.
Easier.
Normal.
Okay, it was easier. Anybody else have a different reaction? How was it for you, Matt?
I'm still a little confused.
Okay, for some people it is confusing. For a lot of people, they feel confused. I'll even draw a little cartoon character because you're used to writing your ideas so differently, and all of a sudden you're supposed to be writing them in a way that it doesn't put them in lines. I mean, if everything's lined up, it looks neat and orderly. So sometimes mind maps look kind of messy. But with a mind map, it's okay if it's messy. It's not like a paper where you have to keep it neat. It's not like a paper where you can't draw in the margins. The idea here is let your ideas flow onto the paper and don't worry what it looks like for now. You've succeeded if you have your ideas on the paper, not if you've made something that looks nice and neat. So it is confusing at first, and sometimes people have to make a map and then study it and draw it over again to make it simpler or make it easier to read. And while we're talking about that, I'll show you one idea. You could take one map. Let's say you have a real messy map here with lots of ideas. You could look at that map and decide which things you like on the map, which things you're not going to use. You could even number them in the order you think is important. Now your messy map looks even messier, but you can redraw it. You would put your symbol in the center. Your first idea would be here, sort of like 1 o'clock, if you're looking at the face of a clock. Your second idea would be here, and so on. You'd go around the clock. That way you'd have a map that was very simple to read, that was organized in a different kind of way. Imagine if you were giving a report and you put all your ideas down as you're reading or listening to the teacher or talking in a cooperative learning group. You get all your ideas on paper, then you sit down and copy it over more neatly so that you can look at the neater map to give your report. Any other responses to this whole mapping process when you just tried it?
Well, I didn't really understand how we use these maps.
Okay, good question. How are we going to use these maps? I'll tell you one way that I find maps very useful, and that's for planning. Planning anything. It might be a project. It might be a vacation. It could be a very large thing or a long-term thing, or it might be just something that you're planning to do this afternoon, and you want to be sure you have all the right material and equipment ready to go on a picnic. So planning is one of the uses of mind mapping. And here, what were we talking about using it for right up here? What would that be? When you put all your ideas from a book or a lecture or a discussion on paper and then draw them over again.
Organize.
Yeah, to organize your ideas, that's one. This step right here is definitely organize. And also, the word I was thinking of was study. Mind mapping as a study skill for recording your ideas and for reviewing. So we'll put record and we'll put review. Now, this again is a mind map. It's got a central image. The main ideas are coming out of the central image. And when I have more ideas, like the word uses, we have planning, planning a project. We have room to put a lot more things. Suppose there's lots more uses. We could have a line come here or a line over here. The map has lots of space for you to continue to add ideas. So in a way, you can think on paper by putting the ideas on a mind map in this form. Another thing you can do with a mind map is communicate. I'll put that here. How could you communicate with a mind map? Sort of a tough one. I mean, I'm not sure this mind map would communicate too much if I mailed it to someone. But how could I use it to communicate?
Maybe in front of like a large seminar, you could.
Okay. If I was giving a seminar and talking to a large group, I might create a mind map to show people that would be on the overhead. I might also use it to talk to someone. If I have a meeting with someone, I might have a little map that I'd made of all the things I wanted to discuss with that person. So we could talk with the map in front of us, and that would help me remember the things I wanted to say and make notes about what the other person said. So there's a couple more uses for mind mapping.